Thank you. There we go.
Okay. Yeah, so I said I was going to go over Firebase, and I've mentioned Firebase to you guys a bit before, so I don't think it's anything totally new. But why I found Firebase really useful is it essentially just handles a whole lot of backend stuff, and you don't have to think much about it. So you can do a ton of front end stuff, and you can just use Firebase to do all backend. Like you can use it for, I've used it for authentication and for storage, and it's like really powerful. It handles a whole lot of stuff. Even things like for authentication, if you put in a weird email, or you do like you put in things that it's not really allowed, Firebase authentication like sorts those kind of things out quite simply and easily. So yeah, this is the Firebase landing page, your stock standard. It's got a whole lot of information. And then I've got this whole thing set up. It's very easy to set up. If you have a Google account, you can set it up quite easily. So what you'll do is you'll click on Go to Console. And then within your console, you can see a whole lot of your projects that you've been working on. And each of these projects contain the different kind of aspects of and projects that you've linked to. So let's go into Skilltree. Yeah, so within Skilltree, you can see here you've got this. This is the kind of essentially this is the back end of Skilltree. You've got this nice little graph which shows you how much you've been how much Skilltree's been kind of used or read to or written to. Normally I just click on authentication and then let me just make this a bit bigger on the screen. Yeah, so this is the authentication section. You can see here the different accounts that have created an account on Skilltree. And you can you've got a user ID for each one of them, which is really useful. I'll show why a bit later. You can also use different signing methods. So I've just used email and password as a signing method. So on Skilltree, for signing in, okay, let's log in. You just use an email and password, and then you can authenticate using that. As you can see here, there are like a number of different ways that you can authenticate. Like you can do that through, I think, different modals. Like you can use your Google modal or authenticate via a Facebook modal, which is like really cool. I haven't tried any of them out, but if it's anything based on what I've used for email and password, it's like really simple and easy. And what I've found kind of being able to kind of move into this the space, and what I found is like by using a product like Firebase, I can create this like a whole system. I can create a whole project whereas before I could just do mock up a front end and then I'd be a bit stuck. And again, now where do I store my stuff? How do I create authentication? And Firebase handles a lot of that stuff. I haven't really tried any of the others, but Firebase is really, it's quite simple. Like as far as I can see, it's really simple to jump into, understand. There's lots of documentation, and there are tutorials online. So it's got like a lot of support. So really, I'd recommend using a Firebase if you're looking into getting something to handle your back end, and also getting a bit more familiar with that kind of with backend stuff. Okay, so that's authentication. The other thing that I use quite a bit is Cloud Firestore, and this is essentially storage. So when I first created Skilltree, I I think I mentioned it before, but I messed up a bit and I literally just built it for one person, i.e. me. And then I decided to split it out. And I was like, okay, if I split it out, this means that every account needs to have its own kind of set of data in this. And I was like, how do I create this? How does that work? So what I decided to do is to create kind of new channels of storage based on user IDs. So if you can look at these items here, these like weird gobbledygook bits of kind of writing. These are all user IDs, and these are all linked to the different users that have been authenticated on the system. So just remember 3YFN2. You can see here 3YFN2. So what I've done is once a user authenticates on the system, this is created, cool. You're a user on the system, you're in the system. What you do is when you start working on the system, let's just say I go into skill tree, I either register or log in. Needafin, the.com. Okay, so I'm logging in and now I've got my different items. I'm just going to go to this other login screen that I created. Well, let's just say, yeah, let's go to the welcome screen. Once you go into here and you change details in, and use the wizard. Once you go into here and you actually, create a document, and you like what you've created here in this welcome, you create your skill tree, and it takes you to adulting, let's say. Whenever you create something in skill tree, what skill tree does is it takes your user ID and it creates a collection of data that's based on your user ID. And now kind of how it works is every collection has all of the data that belongs to each user. And I found that system works really well. And it's quite a nifty way to kind of pull in a whole lot of different users and then still separate the data. And also what helps with this is because every user has their own collection of data, you don't have to do a ton of sorting. Like if all of the data was all together in one collection, you'd have to go do a ton of sorting to collect kind of data. Let me actually discuss the structure of how Cloud Firestore is kind of built. So it's based on these things called collections and documents. So what you have is you'll have a collection which you'll create, and it's literally you just create a name of your collection. So let's say call this temp collection. So I've created my collection, and then within a collection you've got an ID. So you can either create an ID by using auto ID, or you can put in a very specific name for your document. So let's say it was just document. So once you create your part, once you create your collection and then you create your document ID, you can actually start creating data within that document ID. But I'm not going to jump into that yet. So here I've created a new collection, and within a collection I've got my document. And then what you can do is you can create as many documents as you want within the space. So let's create a new doc. Let's say that here. So you just can go about creating different documents. And by doing this, this is how you break up information. Now, when you go into a document, this is when you actually kind of drill down to the core of your data. So let's just say you want to create some JSON. Kind of how Cloud Firestore works, it's a whole lot of JSON data. So within here, let's say we'll add name and we'll put in Kelvin. So now it's in this, thanks very much. Within this document, you've got a string and it's called name and Kelvin. So that's a bit of data that you can access now. You can also create different types of data within this. So let's create a object or map, big map, and let's say age. Let's put it a number. Let's put it at 45. And do you guys think I'm 45? Let's say address, and let's say 123 Fake Street. And it's
that's actually where I live, Calvin.
Is that where you live? Snap.
You
Yeah.
you across the street. You had
Such a
122.
coincidence.
122. And so now you've got a you've got a object which you can draw information from. So you can see here now, I've got this kind of storage, and I've created a very simple way of categorizing my data and organizing my data. And I can easily put in this data. I can also manage this data really simply. Like if I wanted to, I could just delete this right here. Simple. I'm going to delete this. You can delete a document as well. It's easy enough. I'm so scared I'm going to delete a document that I need to keep. And then you can also delete collections. So it's really easy to use the system. Okay, let's delete that 10 collection. So how am I doing on time, Jan? Like how many minutes do I have?
Well, the session is until 4:30, but we can run a little bit over if people have time.
Yeah, I don't think I'll run too much over. So how this looks on the code side of things is what you'll do is you'll create a component. I've created here this fire config component. So you create this component which has all of your Firebase configs. I've saved these configs in an env file. That's why I'm using this public runtime config. And the key is this actually, this pulls in these variables. And then, by the way, Fuba is another one of my on a project. It's a grocery app that I'm building for myself. Until I'm not building it for myself and then have to re-architect it. But yeah, for now, I'm just building it for myself. So how that looks is I pull in that config. I just import that config component. And then this is kind of how it looks code-wise. I call that component, and then that component has a whole lot of different functions like a .auth, and within .auth you can .create user with email and password. And yeah, this is kind of how you would carry out different kind of commands and read and write, authenticate with Firebase. Let's look at another example. So let me just boost up the size. So in this example, I'm creating a new collection. And remember, I did that thing where I created these new collections based on user IDs. This is it right here. So when the user effect kicks off, when your page starts loading, then what I do is I run this fire.auth, and I check if the user is logged in. And if the user is logged in, the next step is I create a new collection called essentially named according to the user ID. The document that I'm creating is initialize, and then .set is that sets the data within the document. And the information I'm putting here is hello Fuba. So let's go to Cloud Firestore, and let's go to Fuba. And here's the collection that's based on user ID. You can see the document called initialize has been created, and then the data Hello Fuba sitting in here. In the same way, I can pull that data. I can read from Firebase. What this does as well is, and it can be a bit dangerous, but Firebase also treats things very simply. So in this scenario, if you don't have a collection based on your user ID, it will create a new collection. But if you do have a collection based on your user ID, it will overwrite it. So that's something that you must be really careful about when creating and playing around. Like there are a few shortcuts. So if you want to create like a new document, you just kind of write in the collection and then you say .doc and put in the name and it'll just create the document, which is great. But it's like, it simplifies some things, but part of me is like, oh, but what if you make a mistake and you overwrite another document, or, you know, so those are things I haven't come across too often. And it makes working with Firebase a lot simpler. But there's part of me that's like a bit freaked out where it's like, oh, what if things go wrong and things get deleted? But I've generally found the experience like quite easy, quite simple. So if you guys get a chance, you know, give it a bash and play around in it. Yeah, I'm being able to build some cool stuff with it.
Very cool. Powerful
I
stuff.
have a question. I have a question, Calvin. Is there a limit to all the data that you can store in Firebase?
I think there is a limit. I'm working on a free account, but I haven't paid too much attention to how far I can push it.
Yeah.
I'll have a check and then I'll post something up. I'll post something what I can find.
Awesome. Lightning sessions, I dig it.
Thanks, dude.
Yeah.
Thanks, Calvin.
Thanks,
My
Colin.
pleasure.
I'm going to stop the recording.